Okay, we're talking about Matt Robinson.
Yes, great writer, African American. So he was able to create sincere African American characters like Roosevelt Franklin. And then, unfortunately, he left to pursue other goals in his life. So I only knew him for maybe 2 years. He was the one who used to tell me, "You have to do Puerto Rican stuff on the show. You're supposed to do that."
That brings us to Roscoe Orman, who took over.
Roscoe Orman, another wonderful, dignified person. He told me a story once that I think really is Roscoe, and that is that we travel around the country individually to perform at various places. And he said to me that he went to, he was in the South somewhere, maybe about, I don't know, 5 years ago or something. And he went into a restaurant to get, here he's like being Gordon of Sesame Street. He's going to perform for a bunch of kids later on. And he goes into a restaurant and he says, he overhears people saying, "Who does that nigger think he is coming in here?" And he says, "Well, after I heard that, I certainly didn't think I wanted to stay in that restaurant any longer, and I took my sandwich to the hotel room." While he's telling me this whole story, he's laughing because these people are so dim, because these people are so stupid, because these people are so ridiculous to make that kind of a statement. Had that happened to me, I would have been angry. I would have gotten right into, but he's such a man of composure and dignity that he saw the idiocy and stupidity in them that had nothing to do with him. And I think that grace and dignity is everything that is appropriate for Sesame Street.
For the character of Gordon himself?
I think that comes, I don't think you can differentiate between Gordon and Roscoe, or Sonia and Maria, or Luis and Emilio, because we are who we are. People say, when is somebody going to write the big expose on Sesame Street? And I say, you're not going to get, what you see is what you get. And that's true. I mean, that is really true. So Gordon is very much, you know, like Roscoe. He's a, science teacher, always strong, someone who can take care of things, great role model. Any problems in the neighborhood, Gordon can solve. We can all solve all of the problems in the neighborhood. We are decent people.
Loretta Long.
Loretta Long is cheerful, great singer. She's from the Midwest. She was a school teacher out there. Roscoe has been an actor and was an actor before. He continues to be an actor. But Loretta comes from a teaching background. And she is just as positive as can be. She is exactly like Susan. It's a pleasure to work with her.
Bob McGrath.
Bob McGrath, the tenor, the Irish tenor. Once again, I mean, we do sound like the most boring bunch of people sometimes. I don't think so, that's not true. But he's a very warm and giving person. Bob and Ann will come over to my house for dinner and we'll talk about things, and Bob's good for at least eyes watering at least 2 or 3 times. Whether we're talking about some thing our children did, oh, that's so great, I just love it, or something that the show is doing, because he's a man of great feeling.
Linda Bove.
Linda Bove, I learned a lot from her. Remarkable, certainly, to pursue an acting career and be deaf. charming person puts up with a world that doesn't know sign language in a great way.
Emilio Delgado.
He's probably I'm closest to him. My husband likes, I mean, we all, when we got married, when my husband and I really got married, Richard went to dress at Emilio's house. That's how close we are. And he is the most wonderful people. Even the most wonderful of us sometimes get irritated and can make a snide remark about someone's performance, or some puppeteer thinking the world is his oyster, or some director who didn't do his job and makes everyone suffer. And everyone, including myself, has been guilty of saying about somebody. Not Emilio. I promise you, he has never, I have never heard a bad statement come out of his mouth about anyone else. On the contrary, he would always see the good part of people. I would say, how can you stand that person who keeps doing that? And he would twist it around.
Ruth Buzzy?
Oh, she's hilarious. She's hilarious. Nice woman. I didn't know her that well. She was not like with the show as long as she wasn't with us as long as we've all been together. But she'll do anything. She's just a great trooper, great performer. And it's interesting that she should be on the show because Sesame Street used to be likened to Laugh-In and compared to Laugh-In, and actually it did come out of that genre of variety television.
Describe the street itself, Sesame Street. Set.
The set that I love, it's changed. The set that I love was the original set, and it was dark. It looked like a real street. The stoop is a real stoop. It's really cement. John Stone wanted it to be as real as possible. There's tenement doors that are called the tenement. We're shooting at the tenement doors. The mailboxes were exactly like tenement mailboxes. The construction doors were dark. The only thing weird about it is that it's an L shape. I mean, no street goes like that. It used to be a straight line underneath. I used to love very much the tire hanging. And, of course, my beloved fire escape. Because I was raised in buildings that had fire escapes, and we used to go out on the fire escape all the time in the summer. And there was community life went out on the fire escape. And, of course, there's the West Side Story kind of Maria thing also happening. And every time, as a matter of fact, on the at the studio, every time I'm in the fire escape, the crew would start going, and it was great. That's a real, to me, it's a very Puerto Rican icon in my mind. That's certainly, many people use fire escapes, but I love the fire escape. I love playing scenes in the fire escape. And I love the tire that used to swing. And then there was an old box of toys, an old beat-up box with a hole in it. And I used to love that, too. And we used to wear regular clothes, run-of-the-mill jeans, because the idea that we were a normal neighborhood that were just vexed by these bright puppets, so they really stood out. That was the contrast. And that was the set that I loved the most. It's changed now. It's a little brighter because now we're competing with other television shows. So that we didn't want kids to turn on to Sesame Street and go, gee, why is that so dark? When all the other shows were so bright. I think that we've brightened up a bit.
Do you think that's changed other parts of the show, the fact that the sets changed like that?
Yes, I think that because there are other kid shows, we have competition. We never had competition before. We were the only ones. Now kids have a choice. So we have to make sure that they stick with us. Whereas before we didn't have to worry about that.
Let's talk about the Muppets.
The Muppets, the heart and soul of the show. I hate when people say, who does that voice? I love that voice. It's not about the voice. It's about the puppeteer's character coming through. I think that that's why these puppets are so remarkable. I think that these puppeteers have saved a lot of money in therapy because they're puppeteers. I have heard Jim Henson as Ernie and Frank Oz as Bert say things to each other that I don't think they would say to each other were they not wearing those puppets on their hands. Ernie is either 8 or 48. So is Bert. Oscar the Grouch can be a middle-aged man because those are the real puppeteers' personalities living through those creatures. The imagination of the public that Jim Henson captured and inspired is remarkable. I never had long conversations with Jim, but he just had a certain sensibility, something about the way he looked at the world that you wanted to be a part of. You wanted him to take you with him wherever he was going. Younger people really had a connection to Jim. I have a nephew who maybe is 35 years old, and my sister's, of course, older than I am. And when John Lennon died of the Beatles, my sister, being of that generation, was very upset. And her son said, I don't understand why you're so upset. I mean, I know he was a famous person. I know he was a Beatle. I know that the Beatles were a big deal. But you didn't know him. Why are you so upset? Which she couldn't explain. And then when Jim Henson Kermit died, he said, I understand why you were so upset. So Jim was like a Beatle and other people in society, other icons that the public feels they know them. They want to see things the way they see things. My sister wanted to see the world the way John Lennon saw the world. My nephew wanted to see the world the way Kermit saw the world.
How did Jim Henson's death affect the show?
Frankly, Jim wasn't doing the show as often as he had been in earlier years. He was doing inserts. He wasn't on the street. When I first started, he was actually on the street with us. But the Jim Henson Company still prevailed, and we had puppeteers that were still, had been trained by him and had his sensibility. People that we've lost, sadly, like Richard Hunt is someone that comes to mind.
As a performer, how was it working with the puppets, the Muppets?
Well, first it was horrible. I remember working with Frank Oz as Grover, and I was sitting in a chair in my lending library, and Grover's talking to me like this, and I keep looking down at Frank, and Grover says, "Don't look at that man down there, I'm talking to you." And then finally, you know, it's hard there. I mean, they're like ping pong ball eyes. There's so much coming through them, though. I remember being on the set with Jose Ferrer was on the set, and he's talking to Elmo, and he just couldn't go on. he just was like looking at Elmo and just laughing and forgetting his lines, and he just couldn't kind of get in the groove because they can be very disarming because they're so real. Now I can imagine, and they have full personalities. I can imagine having dinner with Oscar the Grouch, who's my favorite. Going to an after-hours joint with him.
Talk a little bit about working with Carol Spinney.
I love Carol, and as you know, or maybe you don't, Carol Spinney plays both Oscar and Big Bird. Two parts of his personality for sure. Carol Spinney, the person, is more like Big Bird. But there's that dark side of him that comes out when he's doing Oscar the Grouch that I always love.
How about Frank Oz?
Frank Oz is quick, wonderful manipulator of the puppets, physical manipulator. I took Muppet class once, and I remember I start doing this, which is what everybody does, and then Frank made me realize that it's this. When we talk, we don't go, hi. And, when you see them manipulating without the puppet, you see the beauty in their hands and how expressive it is. And a very funny guy.
Fran Brill?
Oh, Fran. One of my favorite people. She is a terrific straight actress. And I think she is very much like Prairie Dawn. Even though she plays Zoe now, her personality is very much like Prairie Dawn. She's very precise and very perfect little girl. Great straight actress. She would leave us a lot to do stage work. And, we couldn't depend on her not to leave us and go off and do Shakespeare somewhere. So she's a real actress.
Kevin Clash?
Kevin Clash, I never thought I'd live to see the day where any puppet would be more popular than the bird. I never thought it could happen. And then Kevin Clash came on the set, and Elmo was just an anything puppet, which are anything. Like, let's say you're doing a scene and, not a puppet with a character. They were called, an AM. And he was a little red AM, and all of a sudden he gave this character such a personality, and his manipulation is just perfect. I don't see, he quibbles about other puppeteers not being just perfect. I don't see how they're different, but he really is a fabulous manipulator.
Where do you see the popularity of Elmo? How did that come about?
I think that the show is being watched by younger kids, and Big Bird is more complicated. Big Bird can feel sadness and confusion and the loss of the home, like when he lost his home during the hurricane. He can feel jealous, like when my daughter was born, and we had to tell him that, don't worry, we still love you. Elmo is simpler. Elmo just feels good. And I think that's the appeal. And I think he appeals to the younger audience. And he's red. I mean, I think it's that. I think he's easier to grasp for toddlers.
Also, there's the Muppet Rosita.
Right, because finally we can have a Hispanic puppet, because there's Carmen Ashbar is Mexican, and she's playing that character, and it's funny. She once I was in Cancun many years ago, and I walk into a store, and somehow this woman, who turns out to be Carmen, recognizes me, and we talk in Spanish, and she says that her dream in life was always to work with Jim Henson. I mean, people didn't say I want to be a puppeteer. It was like, I want to work with Jim Henson. And I said, oh, that's nice. Thinking, how is this going to happen? You don't speak English? You live in here? Forget it. Next year, she's around the set. Next year, she's still around the set. She finally does it. Like 3 years later, she's got her own character. So I have to hand it to her. I mean, that was just a great story, I think.
Did you have any hand in any of the writing for her?
Well, after she was a character, I did, certainly. I came up with her name.
How did you
Not Rosita, that she was the monster of the caves, because she had like wings, bat wings. So I thought that was interesting. And then she came up with sort of effervescent. She's a complicated character too. I think like Big Bird, you can give her sad things to play, and she you know, she had a heck of a time, because she said like, oh my, now she says to me, you know, when you guys used to improvise, I used to go nuts. I said, why? She says, because I would practice my English, the exact lines, and then you guys would throw in a joke, and I couldn't respond. But now she can. It's a matter of fact, recently she made a, you know, there was a quick change on the set, and she said to me, I couldn't have done that a couple of years ago. But she really, her dream was to work with Jim Henson and be a puppeteer for him. And let's face it, he really put puppets on the map. Who cared about puppets before Jim? I mean, puppets were something Europeans did, you know, and you studied in like theater class when you had to. It wasn't something American, you know, they were precious, and, you know, he made them accessible.
Talk about some of the celebrity guests that have appeared on the show over the years.
Oh, Patti LaBelle made me cry because she sang so beautifully. Tony Bennett, because he was famous when I was a kid. But mostly, Stevie Wonder. Stevie Wonder came on when he had his big hit Superstition. Very superstitious. Very superstitious. Writing on the wall. And he came and sang that song and just rocked the whole studio. And the kids were going nuts, and I was going nuts, and he was the most memorable guest. And then Ray Charles.
Do you have a favorite memory from your time so far on Sesame Street?
Oh my. I think I love to see the kids react to the puppets. And one time I was standing by a 4-year-old, and Carol Spinney took the top half of the bird suit off. I went, oh, this is a drag. This kid's gonna see this. The kid turned to his mother and said, Mom, does Big Bird know there's a man in him? I mean, that's the belief of these puppets. How sometimes the puppets are just hanging, you know, where they're waiting. They're not waiting. I mean, the puppet is there in the closet. And kids will go up to him and say, hi, how are you today? Oh, good. And the mother will say, well, he's sleeping. They buy it. It's great. Those memories are great. But I got to tell you the story about the woman who thought that Emilio and I were really married. She, we were together somewhere. She comes up and she says, oh, it's Luis and Maria. Oh, I'm so happy that my child saw real love on television. And not this fake sitcom love, but real affection between two people, and that you should do that on television. I'm so happy. So Emilio and I decided to tell her the truth, and we said, you know, I'm sorry, we're not really married. And she said, oh, well, as long as you really love each other. So the belief in the humans is just as strong as the belief in puppets.
What kind of reactions do you get when when you're walking down the street and people recognize you?
Kids have said to me, how do you like my new sofa? because they assume that I can see them. I'll ask a kid, what's your name? And they'll go, oh, Maria, you know my name, because they think I know them. Adults will think they went to school with me, or maybe I'm in, they can't quite place me because I'm in their life, but they can't place me. But the best reactions are lately are the people who are grown and have children who are watching the show, who see me on the street and just get so emotional and start weeping. And it's not so much that they're seeing me, but it's because I'm a catalyst all of a sudden, and I've thrown them back in time to when they were sitting on their mother's laps, or whoever took care of them, at 9 o'clock in the morning. The smell of milk or pablum comes back, and all of a sudden they remember the first time they learned to count, as well as I remember the first time I learned to count without the television. And it's nice. It's very nice. We live in a disposable society. We hate things that last. We like things that are new, and then you throw it away. And the fact that we've been on the air so long is remarkable.
Let's talk about the series creator, Joan Ganscuni.
Joan is obviously a woman of great vision. This was all her idea. The story goes, she was having dinner at someone's house who said that her child or their child would get up early and watch the patterns on television, the color patterns, before there was any programming on. And it was her idea to take the power of television and use it to teach cognitive skills. And the thought was that if you can get inner city kids to start school on the same level as middle class kids, they'd have a better chance at succeeding in society on an even level. Anyway, that was her idea. She always says that she's unhappy that the idea didn't have stickability, meaning that everybody didn't do the same thing. That everybody didn't say, oh, television, oh, yes, why waste it? Oh, of course, we can teach many things. We can teach many things to many people. And she's sad that that didn't happen. But certainly a woman of vision.
Stop there to change the tape.